If there's one place you would hope to see democracy functioning well, it's in the U.S. Capitol, which has been a global symbol of democracy over the centuries. But since January 6th, it's actually come to represent something quite different. It's come to represent our divisions. And although there's a lot of talk about unity and compromise, in fact, on Capitol Hill, there is a lot of partisanship and polarization. So here to talk about it today, two men who have been in the middle of all of this. Pleased to have with us Senator Michael Bennet. He's a Democrat from the state of Colorado, and former Senator Jeff Flake, a Republican from the state of Arizona. Great to have you both with us here today.
Good to be with you.
So you were both members back in 2013 of the Gang of Eight, a group of 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans who worked together to come up with a compromise piece of legislation on immigration. It passed the Senate with Republican votes before eventually failing in the House. Senator Bennet, I'd like to ask you if today, in 2021, if there is any possibility of that kind of bipartisan effort on such a contentious and radioactive issue as immigration. Would it be possible today?
I think it'd be very, very difficult today, partly because Jeff Flake's no longer in the Senate, John McCain's no longer in the Senate. The founders created this country not with the expectation that we would agree with each other, but with the expectation that we disagree with each other. And I actually don't think it's about, shabby compromise. I think it's about getting a more imaginative and more durable solution because of the conflict that leads to a solution in a democracy, because there's no king or tyrant to tell you what to think. The only time on a hard issue that I've been in the Senate where we've done that was the Gang of Eight immigration bill. And it reflected the idea that people from different geographies, different parties, different perspectives, different walks of life would have something different to contribute to a piece of legislation that, if you could get it passed, could actually endure because it reflected a consensus view of the American people. And that's what we did with the Gang of Eight.
Senator Flake, do you agree it would be impossible today?
I agree. I find it hard to believe that it could. I mean, it didn't happen, after 2013. I think Michael's right. It's about the last example on a big contentious issue that you've had, the way the Senate used to work, frankly, a bipartisan group meeting. In our case, it was about 7 months, virtually every night that we were in Washington, hammering out details on it. And then, what is just, unheard of kind of today is for Democrats and Republicans in the Gang of Eight saying, we're going to protect this product. We might have to vote against amendments, when it goes through the process that we really like, but we're going to, because that will keep this product, as something that will gain consensus support at the end. And it passed 68 to 32. So yeah, it'd be very difficult today. And but it was a great way to start the Senate. When I moved from the House to the Senate, McCain pulled me aside and said, "Hey, let's do immigration reform. It'll be fun," he said. I think he lied about that, but it was certainly meaningful, and it was a great way to start my time there.
But have things fundamentally changed? Go ahead, Senator.
I was just going to say, it's, I think, really important to remember why that bill did not become law and helped set the conditions for an anti-immigrant president to run for office. And that was because the Tea Party exercised a veto in the House of Representatives. So a minority of the majority said, we will not allow this bill to go for a vote in the House. If it had been put on the floor of the House, it would have passed. And we would have done the work that we needed to do to secure our border and also give a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million people that are here. So just an illustration of the damage that this hyper-partisanship really inflicts.
Agreed.
So now we're looking at COVID relief legislation. There may, in fact, I think, be a vote today in the House. President Biden has said, I want this to be bipartisan. Hey, you folks on the other side of the aisle, if you don't like this, give me your ideas for cutting this. And yet we have Senator Portman saying he hasn't really made a sincere effort to make this a bipartisan piece of legislation. Senator Flake, as a Republican, I'm interested in what you think about the partisanship or lack of
Mhm.
bipartisanship
Right.
around this legislation, which, by the way, polling shows that the American public wants.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I'm obviously disappointed that there can't be in this first big legislative effort in the Biden administration some bipartisanship. The other COVID relief packages in the past year have received bipartisan support. So I think it's unfortunate, and I think that on the Republican side, there haven't been enough of my colleagues willing to compromise on this. I think on the Democratic side too, there's a lot of pressure from the more progressive wing of the party that says, "Hey, now we're in charge. We shouldn't have to compromise." So it's unfortunate. I hope in the end we see a product that is that has input at least from both parties, but it doesn't look like that right now.
Senator Bennet, your take?
Obviously, it would always be better for it to be bipartisan. I don't think that's going to probably happen in this instance. And what I do know about the bill, coming from a state that's a swing state, a purple state, a third Democratic, a third Republican, a third Independent, is that it is broadly popular in my state, in red and blue counties. So I look forward to voting for it. I look forward to defending it in my reelection campaign. And I think that people who voted for the Trump tax cuts for the wealthy are going to have a very hard time explaining why they are voting against the Biden tax cuts for working people that cut childhood poverty in half. I don't understand it. I can't explain it. I think they're going to have a very hard time explaining it themselves.
Does this increase disillusionment with government when you have a majority of the American public saying, we want this legislation, and yet Congress just can't get it done? Senator Flake?
Yeah, I think it does. Now, I should say, though, it's not always the case that what the public wants out there is the best thing. Take, for example, back in 2003, Republicans pushed through, with some Democrat support, but not much, the prescription drug benefit, which, for me in my district, I have Leisure World and a lot of subsidized prescription drug benefits, but it also added about $11 trillion in unfunded liabilities over 75 years. And so Congress is there to make decisions not based on what the public necessarily wants in that moment, but what's good for the country in the future. So, but I do think it does, it does contribute to disillusionment when you look at a body like this and see a package that won't have likely one Republican supporting it. It does, but I do think that there is room still. I think that some of the Republican ideas that have been put forward in terms of maybe topping or capping the amount or the income level that could receive some of this stimulus funding or COVID relief funding, I think some of those are good ideas, and I hope that in the end we can have some Republican support.
If I could push back on you just a little, and I'd like input from both of you on this. You said it's up to the Congress to decide what's good for the country, and that's true. But there is a perception amongst some Americans that really you don't care about the public up there. All you care about is power and politics, and that's all it's about. Senator Bennet?
I think the reason look, there are lots of reasons people are disillusioned with the federal government. We spent 20 years fighting 2 wars in the Middle East with quite uncertain result. China has grown in ways that have made our economy collateral damage, and it's not apparent to the American people that we've done anything about that. And we really haven't delivered anything that's made a meaningful difference in their lives. And that's why this massive increase to the child tax credit, which is the bill that cuts childhood poverty in half, which has been my bill for the last 10 years. Mitt Romney actually now has a version of that bill that he just introduced 2 weeks ago. Finally, what we'd be saying to the American people is we can make a difference in your lives, not just a difference to the richest people and the most powerful people in the country. And I think that's the opportunity that we have right now in the wake of a pandemic that has revealed, among other things, the really sorry condition of our healthcare system and our resilience. And that's because of 20 or 30 years of a lack of investment in the American people and in our physical infrastructure. And I think if we begin to change that, I think we can begin to build confidence. Joe Biden, by winning this election, does not have a fiat to rule. He has the opportunity to earn the American people's confidence and trust. And I hope that's how he approaches the job, because we can restore faith in our exercise in self-government.
Senator Flake, when you left the Senate, you said there may not be a place for someone like me. You weren't an avid supporter.
There is. Come back.
You got one request here. You weren't an avid supporter, to say the least, of President Trump. As you see more and more moderates deciding to leave the Senate, and as those who remain face the prospect of being primaried, what does it say about the future of polarization and partisanship in the U.S. Congress? Is it only going to get worse?
Oh, well, I mean, that's the direction certainly right now. There's just, and Michael will second this, I'm sure, there's very little currency for bipartisanship and for reaching across the aisle. It used to be in campaigns, and you can look back at old campaign brochures where people bragged about, hey, I worked with the other side. I got this passed. That used to get you accolades, and now it gets you a primary. And so there's just very, very little, to recommend, politically at least, working with the other side. Every inclination when a tough issue comes up, whether it's immigration reform or a COVID relief package or climate change, is to basically rush to your tribe, because as soon as you indicate that you might be open to debate or persuasion, then you're hit from both sides. And it's not a comfortable place to be. And so the political safety right now is to kind of rush to your tribe and to figure, I only want to anger one side. And that may be more politically safe, but it's horrible for the country. It really is. So I think it having Joe Biden in the White House, somebody who, was in the Senate for 36 years, when that body, really earned its moniker as the world's most deliberative body. He knows how it works. And I'm sure just having better, behavior modeled from the White House will help a lot. But I don't know if it'll be enough. I hope we can make some inroads on some issues beyond the COVID relief package. And I think we will. I think infrastructure, it's always kind of been the white whale, but I hope we can get there on infrastructure and a few other issues.
Senator Bennet, your thoughts on whether the current polarization in the country will drive further polarization in the Congress?
Well, first of all, the cost to the American people of this polarization is enormous. So Jeff mentioned climate change. I agree, by the way, with everything he said. Jeff mentioned climate change. You can't solve climate change 2 years at a time. You can't elect one Congress and have them put in the answer, then have another Congress take it out, then put it in, then take it out, then put it, which has been the story of healthcare for the last 10 years. That cannot be the sort of end point of our democracy, because if it is, we'll never solve climate change. Democracy won't be able to solve it. Maybe an authoritarian regime like China might solve it, but we won't be able to, which is why we have, for a durable result to happen, you've got to find a result that you can preserve and protect even through changes in political parties. And that's what we got to find a way to get back to. I think to do that, we're going to have to reform our political system. I mean, Jeff will remember this. The sort of canary in the coal mine here was another Senator Bennet. He had two T's at the end of his name, who was running in Utah for election. He got taken down on a Saturday morning in, kind of a back room of this really small caucus session that came after him for the Tea Party for having worked with Ron Wyden on a healthcare bill. And ever since then, it's been one cascading thing after another. We have to find a way to broaden participation, open up the ability of people to participate. I think get rid of partisan gerrymandering in the House. I'm interested in things like ranked choice voting for the Senate, and obviously getting money out of our political system would also help. But we've got to we've got to find a way, and it shouldn't be surprising, because every time we've had kind of a Senate or a House that actually begins to work again for the American people, it's sort of preceded by a period of reform. And that's, I think, where we need to be now.
But I'm wondering if you can institute those kinds of reforms given the polarization in the Congress, or there's instant pushback to those kinds of proposals.
Well, I'll speak for myself. It's extremely, extremely challenging when you got, somebody like Mitch McConnell, who's a very, very strict adherent to his view that there should be no restriction on, money in politics, just to take that as an example. It's very tough. I mean, that's an ideological position of his. But we're going to try, I think, in this Congress to see if we can make progress. And I've been telling the people on my side, we should call our bill, which I hope will include things like my bill to ban members of Congress from ever becoming lobbyists, that we actually passed the Drain the Swamp bill that Donald Trump promised he would pass, but never actually did pass. And I would then be able to go to the reddest parts of my state and say, let me tell you what we did to put your voice in politics and to take the money out of politics. I'd love to spend the next 18 months doing that.
Senator Flake, I think you were about to jump in.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more in terms of political reform, electoral reform in the states. We saw it happen. For example, Lisa Murkowski is one that's likely to work with Democrats more than perhaps any other Republican. She might have that luxury because in Alaska now there's a top four system with ranked choice voting.
Exactly. Yeah.
And frankly, here in Arizona, for years and years, Senator McCain and me and Senator Kyle and others spent a lot of time and resources, campaign money to try to hire people, to bring more people, to have greater participation on the Republican side in precinct committees, and to get maybe a saner Republican Party. That required a lot of time and resources, and we're all gone from the Senate and politics now, and that ship has sailed. In Arizona, and so the only thing to do now is to change the way we elect people. I'd love to have something like Alaska just did. If not that, then maybe top two system like California has. In Arizona and in many states, most states, frankly, we have about a third of the electorate that are registered as independents or party not declared. And so they're paying, the taxpayers are paying for just two parties to run their own, primaries. And in a manner, at least in Arizona, particularly among Republicans, where it produces the most extreme candidates. And, Democrats may like it because it's electing Democrats in Arizona on a statewide basis, but it's not good for the political process. It's certainly not good for Republicans. So I agree with Michael. I think it's going to lead to some electoral reforms that Congress may not have to approve of. The states will move ahead, and a growing number of independents. In Arizona, just to give you an example, in the first, I think it was 2 weeks after the January 6th riots, more than 10,000 Republican voters changed their registration because they didn't want anything to do with that. And most of them went toward independence. So that group is growing, and we ought to recognize that.
And so that raises the possibility of a third party. Very quick thoughts on that before we take some viewer questions. Senator Bennet, what do you think? Third party?
We're better off focusing on fixing the system that we have. In Colorado, Jeff's right. We have a third of our voters are independents. They get to vote in whatever primary they want to vote in, and I think that is an important step forward. I'd rather have in the end, a ranked choice system like the one Jeff's talking about. And it is a great irony of all of this. I mean, Mark Kelly and Kyrsten Sinema are Democrats from Arizona. When Jeff was a senator from Arizona, it would have been inconceivable that there would be two Democrats from Arizona. That's a result of a system that has warped the outcomes for the state or change the outcomes in the state. In Ohio this time, my friend and Jeff's friend, Rob Portman, can't run for re-election because the right wing of the Ohio Republican Party is going to destroy him, which means that it gives Democrats the opportunity I would say, the moral obligation to win that seat, so we don't end up with some, sort of QAnon actor in there or right-wing Republican in there. And so I do think there are reforms we can make, and we should make them. And if we have to do them state by state for the moment, that at least is a benefit to those states. The result of our reforms in Colorado is we have the second highest voter participation rate in the country.
Senator Flake, very quickly, third party, viable or not?
No, for whatever reason, we've given ourselves two political parties in this country. It's worked well for most of the history of the country, and I think that we ought to stick with it for the future and make reforms that will make both parties more sane.
Carolyn Strand from Illinois asks, what is the impact of the events of January 6th on our democracy? Senator Flake, you mentioned it's led to some changes in party affiliation. Senator Bennet, your thoughts on fundamentally how that might have impacted American democracy?
Well, when they took us off the Senate floor and put us in a place where we were sheltering, I didn't realize how dangerous it was. So I wasn't actually thinking about the danger to us. I was watching the television, and these images that you can never unsee of the platform that had been set up for the peaceful transfer of power being stormed by American citizens in front of the entire world. I grew up seeing that scene, play out in places in Latin America or in the old Soviet Union. Never in a million years would I have imagined that it would happen here. And I think it was a triumph for China and a triumph for Iran and a triumph for Putin and Russia. On the other hand, having said that, because 60 judges did their job, because the Republicans, unlike many Republicans in the Senate and unlike Jeff Flake, the Republicans in Secretary of State in Arizona and the Republican Secretary of State in Georgia did their job, our democracy held. And as a result, we had a January 20th when we did have the peaceful transfer of power. Many countries that go through something like this have January 6th, they never get to the 20th. We got to the 20th. So I think our job now is to recognize just how fragile our democracy is, which is extremely fragile, and commit to do everything we can to strengthen it so that we have an offer to humanity that looks different from totalitarianism. That is what is at stake.
Senator Flake, there was a failure, of course, to convict President Trump in the Senate. What are the consequences of that in terms of democratic norms going forward?
Yeah, it was kind of the final act, if you will, of normalizing behavior and a president that should have never been normalized. I mean, that was very troubling. And now you see, the president will speak at CPAC on Sunday, and he'll have a lot of Republicans fawning over him and seeking for his approval. It's very, very troubling. I completely agree with Michael. We came very close. Some of our institutions held up well, most of them. I mean, obviously, a free press, the independent judiciary, both the Justice Department and judges. What was disappointing was to see people in Congress in my party to buy into the big falsehood about the election and to amplify the president's, lies about the election, and that's still going on. And so it is still very troubling, and it scares me. So I hope that we can move. I tend to think that the president will lose influence faster than he wants to, but it can't happen any too soon.
What makes you think he's going to lose influence? There isn't that much indication so far.
Yeah, there hasn't, but just traditionally, historically, when presidents leave office, once you lose the trappings of power, or the trappings of office and the levers of power, and Trumpism isn't so much a philosophy as an attitude. It requires some kind of swagger that comes with winning, and that's why the president is so reluctant to admit that he lost, because you lose that. And so I just think that it's going to fade, particularly given the president's ongoing legal troubles in other venues that are likely to, I think hold to their jobs more than my party did during the impeachment trial.
Senator Bennet, we have a question from Joanna who asks, how do we help continue respectful civil discourse? I'd suggest maybe we have to renew civil discourse. Your thoughts on that question?
I think that we see it every day at the local level. There are here and there, of course, there are places where they're imitating the stuff at the national level. But I was a school superintendent before I was in this job. I've been in business before that. And every single school board meeting in this country and every single, city council meeting is an exercise in pluralism, something I was talking about earlier, where people of different points of view exchange those points of view to reach a decision of some kind, whether it's a zoning decision or about which schools need to open, which schools need to close. We need that back at the federal level, and part of it is we've got to not reward politicians who come home and say only that we couldn't get anything done and we blame the other side for it. Instead, look for people like Jeff Flake who actually go there to try to get something done and don't pretend they have a monopoly on wisdom. And in the end, we have the right to vote people in and out of office, and we should ask ourselves whether we're doing ourselves any good by voting in people who spend all of their time repeating the talking points on Fox News or on MSNBC. Jeff made a point the moment ago that I want to just underscore. It should not be acceptable to the American people that there are people in the Senate who advocated and reinforced President Trump's big lie, then brought us to a position where they were claiming to his supporters that somehow the election could be undone. And then they stood on the floor of the Senate and said, we, those of us who are honoring the will of the voters, were disrespecting the quote, was elected president. Those people have a duty to the Republic to tell people the truth. And they didn't do it at a moment of peril for the Republic. And those kind of folks should not be sent back to Washington if we're going to expect the place to work.
And we have to leave it there. Senators Flake and Bennet, thank you both so much for joining us here today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Enjoyed it. Great to be with Michael. Good to see you again.